his brother
Neil Finn.
and we are from a group called
Split Ends.
and we are now talking on FM Spotlight about the Split Ends saga.
Everything and anything
You've always wanted to know.
I saw you standing.
That was late last night. Some soothing cocktail nostalgia there for early Split Ends fans. This was a song that we recorded twice, once in Melbourne and once in London with Phil Manzanera. And it was the very first film clip that we ever did was for this song, featuring a very drunk Michael Chun on bass guitar. Okay.
I think that the best thing about us calling it quits now is that we are stopping when there's a very good spirit within Split Ends still, which we've always had through the years. There's been very difficult times, but we've had a real chemistry there that a lot of bands don't have, I think. And that's still very much with us, but the seeds of perhaps of drifting apart were sort of sown a little bit last year, and it was like, in some ways, nipping problems in the bud by calling a halt to it now. And we're such good friends, we didn't want anything to develop to the stage where there was any frustration between individuals.
Yeah, but there's no denying that my going off and doing a solo record had an effect on the band, and quite a considerable effect, more than I had thought at the time. I thought it would be quite possible to juggle both careers, and it really wasn't, because it distracted me too much from the band and in a way broke some of the bond that did exist between us. I think a band is a band, and as soon as somebody goes off and does something on their own, it's like, I suppose, a marriage where you go off and have an affair and then you come back and you can never really be trusted.
It's never quite the same again. Yeah. But it was more than that as well. It was within myself.
Yeah.
I probably felt the same things that Tim felt after Time and Tide, wanting to go and do things which are more self-motivated, I suppose. With the band, you have to accept that there's a stamp put on your music by everybody in the band, and that's the great thing about a band, but it's also sometimes a frustration when you have specific ideas for your songs and you have to see them turn out slightly differently to what you'd like them to. So there's a whole lot of reasons. Yeah,
but there's also very strong possibilities that we'll work together in different lineups in the future. There will be no Split Ends reunion, we can assure you of that. But Neil and I might do something together one day, probably will, and who knows what else will happen. But basically now, for the next 12 months, we need to get on with our own sort of things.
We look at it as a fantastic challenge. I mean, I've never been in another band, and I'm just dying to soak up a few new influences and new experiences. I think we've covered
that nicely.
Break up rather nicely now. There's enough said.
And there's a good body of work there to explore and examine. You can play doctors and nurses with Split Ends.
And all the questions are answered in the songs anyway. We've always written about what's been going on. The new album, See You Round, is no exception. It's got a lot of information about what was in my mind and what everybody else's mind too, for that matter.
Right.
Hi, this is Neil.
And this is Tim.
We're from Split Ends and we're on FM 104, and that was my mistake.
When I remember we were always a very ambitious band, and we couldn't wait to get to England initially, and we thought Australia was just like a stepping stone to England. In fact, I remember when we first arrived, we said to a couple of journalists that we expected to be out of the country by the end of the year. And in fact we were. We went across to England at the end of '75 and did an album there with Phil Manzanera. But then we realised, I think, after a few struggles in England, we had some marginal success and got quite a lot of press and good critical acclaim, etc., and did some good tours there. But we also didn't really make much money there, and it was very hard for us to survive. And we came back to Australia no longer thinking of it as a stepping stone, but thinking of it as a base. And it was a great sense of relief to make that decision, because Australia is a very good country for the rock music industry. I think it's very supportive, and there's a lot of competition here. It's very healthy. So as soon as we decided that, I think the band really started to settle down and explore what we could do musically. Up till then, we'd been rehashing the past in a way. Like, we went off to England and re-recorded Mental Notes, thinking that we had to be better because it was England, all the sort of naive crap that young bands sometimes think. But now, even now, Australia is still our base, really, even though we're sort of exploring other territories.
New Zealand's a pretty special place in a lot of ways, because we've only ever gone back there to do concert tours, and so they've never seen us in pubs, so it's quite special for New Zealanders, I think. We're probably the only New Zealand band that's ever done concert tours regularly, isn't it, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so.
And we've sold.
Sharon O'Neill does them, but she's not a band, she's one person.
So it is, it's good, fitting that we're ending in New Zealand, in Auckland. Was the scene of the first concert. Hello, this is Neil.
And this is Tim.
From Split Ends on FM 104 with Brisbane's best rock. In stereo, Tim. In stereo.
In stereo, Neil, in stereo. This is Tim
and Neil Finn,
and we're talking about Split Ends songs on FM 104.
The whole time of True Colours was obviously very exciting. It came out of the blue in a way. We would never experienced that degree of success before, and it was a very uplifting experience when it happened. Seeing your record at #1 simultaneously, record and album and single, is a very exciting thing. We had a pretty wild tour with the Sports. The thing I remember most about it is the absolute rampant water pistol fights that used to happen and general sort of goonery in the bus. It was a really fun tour.
And we used to make sign language to each other each week about positions of albums and singles, like two single fingers was 1 and 1, and then as it started dropping it was 2 and 2 and 3 and 3, and that was all we would say to each other with silly grins on our faces. It was a very idiotic and very, very ecstatic time.
It was pretty strange. It didn't sort of strike us at the time in a way.
Well, it lasted for a while, and then we suddenly realised that success was pretty meaningless.
It certainly was in terms of whether we were making good records or whether we were playing well on stage. In fact, it makes it harder in a way to. As soon as you've got a pressure of coming up with a follow-up, it narrows your field of vision in the studio somewhat, and you tend to shy away from anything that's not sort of. I think we combated that, having said that, quite well. We've always, since then, we've got very different from True Colours. I think Time and Time particularly was a very different album to True Colours and appealed to almost a different sort of person. Split Enz have always been into change. Well, Tim, let me ask you what it's like to be a solo performer on stage, because I've got to face it next year and I've never done it before.
Well, let me tell you, young man, it's not so bad. In fact, if you gather a good team of people around you, it's not really like being solo at all. That's what I found.
So,
doing. Cut, edit. Hello, Brisbane. This is Tim Finn here with his brother
Neil Finn,
and we're talking about Split Enz songs
in the FM spotlight.
Well, when we first started, of course, we were in New Zealand, and we were only semi-pro, if that. We were quadri-pro. We used to do concerts every 3 months and sort of work at the post office or whatever. But when we came to Australia in '75, well, let's think. I mean, those were the days of like Sherbet and Skyhooks, and AC/DC were just sort of starting, and in fact, the local industry here was just starting to flex its muscles, I think, especially when Skyhooks came along and sold so many records. Suddenly it was like pretty cool to be an Australian band. Up till then, I think that been a bit like New Zealand. If it was local, it must be a bit sus. But then there was this real new pride emerging, and we arrived in the middle of that, completely different from everybody else, and stood out like a sore thumb. You either loved or hated us, which I think we always enjoyed. Extreme reaction, which is great. But it certainly changed. I mean, in those days, Countdown was just starting as well. It wasn't the ubiquitous Sunday night powerful organ that it is now. It was probably watched a lot, but it didn't have. No one knew how powerful it was going to become in terms of launching singles. I can't. There's so many different people too in the industry then. Journalists.
Around the time of True Colours, there was a big change in the Australian industry. It seemed like too. There was. It had been very rock and roll oriented before that. I think after 1980, it got a bit more modern. I'm not, not just because of True Colours or anything, but there was suddenly a lot of bands getting #1 albums out of the blue. It was, True Colours and East and Ice House did well, and Men at Work came along eventually. And
it was the start of a new era. It was more tuneful era, I think.
Yeah, I think things are a little bit in a slump at the moment. Personally, I don't think there's that much good new stuff around, but
there may be, but radio's a bit tight.
Well,
it always been.
I'm not sure if that's the case or not. It's always hard to know which comes first, the radio or the record.
We're too involved in it all to have much of an overview, really, I think. I always think that. I don't follow the scene as such.
Industry, mate. Industry.
Mate, the industry. Kill.
This is Neil.
Neil, this is Tim. Who is Iris?
This is a question everybody asks me, and I have to be quite completely honest and say I've never known an Iris in my life, but I did actually genuinely think it was a nice name. And it just popped out of my head one day, and the song came with it. And it's a cop-out answer, but it's true.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Maybe it's the girl of your dreams or something.
The apple of my eye. It's very deep.
It's a good little song, Neil. Anyway, you did very well with that one. I like it. It stands up well.
Thanks, Tim.
This is Neil and Tim on FM Spotlight. FM 104 here in Brisbane.
Spotlight something.
The spotlight's on us and our music. Neil, tell me about this new record of yours, See You Round. Seeing as though I wasn't on it.
Sans moi.
Sans moi, oui.
Well, we decided originally when the band broke up to do an EP because we had some songs we'd been working on, and it seemed like it would have been a shame not to complete the cycle of the songs somehow. And so we went into the studio with the intention of doing an EP. It grew very quickly into doing an album because we, first of all, had more songs than would fit on an EP, and we also just rediscovered some tracks we started last year, which we, having listened to them, thought were great, and we made it an album. It was a very fast album, 5 weeks altogether. We had a fantastic time doing it. It was a very, very enjoyable album to make, and we...
It's in the grooves. That's what they always say. It's in the grooves.
And
if it's fun to make, then it's going to be fun to listen to.
There's a track from every person in the band too, which is a point of interest for people.
And another point of interest is the very last track on the album. Is the very last track on any Split Enz album ever was a Noel Crombie song. So it's pretty Noel, I reckon. And Noel is very cunning. He gets right in there at the end.
He does.
Takes the final bow.
I feel like listening to a track of the new album.
Which one, Neil?
The new single, I Walk Away.
Here, here. Well, here we are, embarking on our last tour together as a band, and it's an emotional experience for Split Enz, and I think it will be for our fans as well. Each night will be very special, being the last night, except in places where we're doing 2 shows, but even there it'll be like the last time that the band plays in each town, and we still have a lot of passion and a unity within the band, which I think will become obvious on stage, despite the fact that we're finishing. I think we're going out together, as it were.
That's right, very warm sentiment, Tim.
And we'd like to pay a special tribute, of course, to all the Friends of the Enz, very happening fan club, the biggest fan club in Australia.
And the best.
And the best. And in fact, we constantly get letters from fans saying, I'm a member of the INXS fan club, I'm a member of the Australian Crawl fan club, but your fan club is by far the best. We must be doing something right.
We got a good person running it, that's about all.
Peter Green. Has to be seen to be believed.
Well, this is Neil from Split Enz. I'm with Tim from Split Enz too. And that was a song which was very close to Tim's heart, called Dirty Creature.
Very close to my heart and my darkest recesses.
It was perhaps the most dark song Tim's ever written. Also, actually, incidentally, one of my favourite film clips, which we sweated over, well, not sweated, we froze in the Channel 9 pool in Melbourne, in a cold, freezing Melbourne day with wetsuits and clothes weighed down with stones and guitars.
Suffering for our art, eh?
Yep.
That was this song I'm very proud of, actually. It's I think one of the ones that I'm most pleased with of all the songs that Split Enz have ever recorded. I think the lyrics, particularly for me, are very truthful and really touch on things that go a bit deeper than the usual pop song or whatever, not to be skite.
But you are, Tim.
But, well, I'm justifiably proud of some things, yeah, and I'm ashamed of others. But the thing is, I'm ashamed of my smelly socks, for example. But the other thing I'd like to say is that it's ironic in a way that it's my favourite, or one of my top 3, because it was very much a collaborative song. It was me, Nigel and Neil. We wrote it together, not at the same time. We all came up with different bits at different times, which was a real band effort, and that to me is quite ironic, really. You know, you sort of consider yourself a solo songwriter and everything, and then some of your best work is done with other people. It's good. Okay, Brisbane, we remember Cloudland, we remember down the coast at the Playroom and Seagulls, and we remember playing at the university here.
Queen's Hotel.
We remember many nights here in Brisbane, hot sweltering nights on the stage, grease paint dripping off our chins. Well, this night coming up is going to be no exception. This will be the biggest and the best yet, because it's going to end with a bang. So this is the end of the show for tonight, but we'll see you in concert very soon, and until then, stay tuned.
It's going to be wild, don't miss it.
It is too. Cages are open.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ball Boys. If you'd like to join FM 104 for our final Split Enz concert on Sunday night when it ends with a bang, tickets are still available from Festival Hall, only $12.90.